I want to tell you about a patient who on paper was doing everything right. Thin, fit, rose several times a week. He has high blood pressure, so he's been under good medical care. He has a calcium score, which is a CT scan of the heart looking at the amount of calcium in the blood vessels around the heart, and it was 0. His LDL cholesterol was within the laboratory normal range, but for him it was higher than ideal. So a statin had been started a while ago, just in case and for prevention. And then something strange started to happen. He kept getting injured, muscle pulls, tendon issues, nagging soft tissue injuries that just wouldn't stop. It was literally every few weeks that he was having something new happen. And at first, it just looked like bad luck, middle age, intense sport, maybe not stretching enough. But there was a clear pattern. These injuries began after the statin, and they stopped after we stopped the statin. Now, this is not a randomized trial. It's one person. But I've seen various versions of this story again and again in clinic, and I think it's worth talking about. Statins can be life-saving drugs for people at high cardiovascular risk, people who've had previous heart attack or stroke, diabetes with a high risk, very high LDL, or a lot of plaque burden shown in imaging. Now, in those patients, the benefit is clear, and we often accept side effects because we're trying to prevent a very serious event. But not everyone is in that high-risk category. There's another group of people I see who are thin, fit, sporty, often with normal or near normal cholesterol, and sometimes with a calcium score of 0. They're already doing the lifestyle work, the exercise, nutrition, weight, sleep, and yet they've been put on a statin just to be on the safe side. Sometimes that makes sense, and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes the cost shows up in ways we just don't expect. Pain, reduced performance, repeated injuries. So back to my patient. He's a middle-aged man with high blood pressure and otherwise healthy. He loves rowing. It's not just exercise for him, it's his joy, it's his stress relief, his rhythm. And after starting a statin, he became injury prone, calf strain, shoulder issue, tendon pain, always something that kept him off the water or off the rowing machine. And we tried adjusting things. He did the right rehab, strength work, physiotherapy, and we'd even tried different statins at different doses. But the pattern remained. On statins, he was fragile and injury prone. And off statins, his body felt much more resilient. So at a certain point, looking at his risk profile, bloods, blood pressure, lifestyle, that calcium score of 0 and an LDL that was raised compared with ideal, but still technically within the normal range, it was reasonable to ask, is this statin really necessary for you right now at this dose, given what it's doing to your quality of life? We decided together to stop the statin and monitor things carefully. And over time, the injury pattern faded. He was able to train and row without that constant sense that something would go every few weeks. His blood pressure still needed attention, of course, and that's where the rest of the plan came in. Around the same period, we added a very specific supplement, a standardized extract from red grape cells, rich in a particular form of resveratrol called piscid resveratrol, which is along with other grape polyphenols. Now, what does that actually mean? Well, resveratrol is a plant compound found in red grapes and red wine. In this case, it's delivered in a form that's designed to be more stable and better absorbed. It targets the lining of the blood vessels, what's known as the endothelium. And the idea is that it can help increase nitric oxide, which relaxes blood vessels, and reduce endothelial 1, a substance that makes them constrict. In plain language, it may help the arteries behave more flexibly, improving blood flow and reducing stiffness. And he took 1 capsule a day. Over the next weeks, his blood pressure readings became more stable. But the most striking thing was something else, his migraines. He'd had fairly frequent migraines before, and a disabling headache that would literally knock him out for a day at least. And after starting the grape-derived resveratrol supplement, his migraines completely stopped. Now, at one point, he ran out of the supplement and he didn't refill it for a while. And during that period, the migraines came back. And when he restarted the same supplement, the migraines again disappeared. And this time they stayed away as long as he kept taking it regularly. Now, is that absolute proof that this supplement treats migraines? No. This is still one person and life is messy. Sleep, stress, diet, hormones, all of that also plays a role. But from his perspective, there was a clear before and after pattern and a very clear stop and restart pattern. On statins, recurrent injuries. Off statins, injuries settled. On the grape resveratrol supplement, blood pressure more stable and migraine stopped. And off the supplement, migraines returned. Back on the supplement, migraines disappeared again. I'm Dr. Michael, a family doctor, and this is exactly the kind of grey zone case that makes me think about how we can do care differently. As a doctor, I have to hold two truths at the same time. One, anecdotes are not the same as large clinical trials. Two, we ignore consistent, detailed patient stories at our peril because they often point to mechanisms we haven't yet fully understood or studied. Mechanistically, there are at least two big stories here. The first is the statin story. Statins lower cholesterol and reduce cardiovascular events for many people, but in a subset, especially very active people, they seem to increase muscle and tendon vulnerability, aches, weaknesses, stiffness, slower recovery from strain, and even increased risks of tears and tendinopathy meaning a disease or damage to the tendon. Now, there are several possible mechanisms: effects on muscle, energy production, and mitochondria, changes in cell membranes, effects on how muscles and tendons repair after micro-injury. If you're doing a lot of sport, you might feel those effects much more than someone who hardly moves. Now, the second story is the vascular and the neurovascular story. The inner lining of blood vessels, otherwise known as the endothelium, plays a big role in how blood flows, how vessels dilate, and how they respond to stress. Nitric oxide helps vessels relax. Endothelin-1 pushes them to constrict, which means to tighten up. A grape-derived resveratrol supplement that improves endothelial function and increases nitric oxide could, in theory, improve overall blood flow, reduce small vessel spasm, stabilize blood pressure, and in some people reduce the tendency toward migraine, which is partly a vascular and neuroinflammatory phenomenon. Add to that resveratrol's antioxidant and anti-inflammatory effects, and you can see a plausible pathway. Calmer blood vessels, less oxidative stress, less irritability in the brain circulation and pain pathways. Again, that doesn't mean it will work for everyone, but it does mean that what we saw in this patient isn't magic. It's at least biologically plausible. Now, an important point, just because we stopped his statin doesn't mean we're ignoring his cardiovascular risk. Quite the opposite. Because he had side effects and he's relatively low risk, we decided to individualize his care and monitor things more closely from another angle. We're tracking his carotid arteries with ultrasound over time to make sure there's no progression of plaque. We're repeating coronary calcium scoring at appropriate intervals to watch for any new calcified plaque. And we're considering a CT coronary angiogram, which is a more detailed scan to have at least one careful look at his coronary arteries, including what's called non-calcified or soft plaque. So we're not flying blind. And on top of that, we're paying attention to the fundamentals: blood pressure control, weight, exercise, sleep, stress, nutrition, the things that are powerful but are far less glamorous than pills. And this is what I want to show with this case. Not that statins are bad or that grape resveratrol cures migraines, but that care can be more nuanced and more tailored and more curious than simply cholesterol high, statin forever. For this man, right now, the plan is no statin because multiple trials caused significant reproducible side effects for him. Careful follow-up of his arteries to ensure no plaque progression using carotid ultrasound, repeat calcium scoring, and possibly CT angiography for a detailed look at the coronary arteries. A vascular supportive supplement with grape-derived pisade resveratrol that, in his case, coincided with both better blood pressure stability and the disappearance of debilitating migraines, with the very telling relapse and remission when he stopped and restarted it. And crucially, the ability to row, the sport he loves, without constant injury and fear. Now, if you're watching this and you recognize yourself, you're thin, fit, sporty, maybe your calcium score is 0, your LDL is normal but a bit high, you're on a statin and you keep getting unexplained injuries or muscle pains, or you've experienced patterns with supplements and migraines, this video is not a recommendation to stop medication or to start any particular supplement on your own, but it is an invitation to a different kind of conversation with your doctor. Ask, what is my actual calculated cardiovascular risk? And then, are you comfortable with that? What is my calcium score? Are there better ways to protect me if I'm having real side effects? Can we look at my arteries directly with ultrasound, calcium scoring, and sometimes even CT instead of guessing? And if something seems to help me, can we try to understand why rather than just dismiss it as coincidence? Medicine at its best is not for or against any one drug or supplement. It's about matching the right tools to the right person at the right time, with eyes open. Statins absolutely save lives in the right context, but in the wrong context for the wrong person, they can quietly undermine the very health and function that we're trying to protect. And compounds like grape-derived resveratrol are not miracle cures, but they may be part of a thoughtful, mechanism-based approach to vascular health and migraine in some people, especially when we pay attention to the details of a real human story. If you're in this grey zone, don't navigate it alone. Bring your story, your injuries, your headaches, your fears, your goals into the room with your doctor. Ask to talk about risk, mechanisms, options, not just a single number on a lab report. Because prevention shouldn't cost you the joy of the sport you love or the freedom to live without pain. This is The Accidental Doctor, where we talk about uncommon, sensible medicine. Thank you for listening. Please share your comments below. I try to answer as many as possible. Stay well, and ciao for now.